Welcome back, everybody, to Mountain in the Mist. We are in part 2 of our rabbit hide tanning series. If you missed part 1, go ahead and go back and watch that because we unboxed all of our chemicals that we use. And it's really important to know what you need for this whole process. So go back and watch that. And if you have watched that, then let's get into this part 2. Really excited to share this process with y'all. A lot of folks have had many questions on how to do this. There's tons of different ways and methods, and everybody does it a little bit different. And this is how I do it. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about what other materials you'll need to tan rabbit hides, as well as why we tan our rabbit hides. And then I'm going to show you how we salt our rabbit hides. Now, because this is a several step process, we're actually going to have a part 3 video that finishes the whole hide. We're going to be pickling in that video, as well as neutralizing, tanning, and drying and breaking it. Make sure you subscribe so you'll get updated when we release part 3. As many of you know, we raise meat rabbits, and with the meat comes the fur. We originally, when we started raising the meat rabbits, it was kind of too much and overwhelming to deal with the fur and the hides. We were just kind of getting started with the meat and how we're going to use that and the other parts of the animals that we just composted the fur. And that was fine for a while until I realized that that was such a wonderful material that I wanted to learn how to use. Thus began my tanning journey. A lot of folks say that 12-week-old rabbits are too young to tan, that their fur and their hide basically just rip. And there is some truth in that, but all the rabbits that we tan are around 12 weeks old. And if you're really careful, you don't get any tears and it comes out as a perfectly wonderful tanned hide. The older the rabbit, the more dense the fur and the less likely it will tear. So it does have its payoffs to grow out your meat rabbits a little bit longer, but then again, you're compromising some food and cost maybe to grow them longer. So 12-week-old rabbits work great, and that's what we're going to be doing today. As far as the other materials that you'll want during this tanning process, other than the chemicals that we need for pickling, the actual tanning, the neutralizing, and the washing, you are going to need a couple of household items to help let this process go smoothly. You don't need any fancy equipment. A lot of the taxidermists have big tumblers and fleshing wheels and huge workspaces and all this fancy equipment, but you could get this done right in your backyard with the tools that you have in your kitchen. And these are the tools that I use. You're going to want a pair of long-sleeved rubber gloves. These come in handy for when working with the chemicals. Even just salt can kind of chew up your fingers. And so I like a good durable pair of rubber gloves. There's a lot of tools that people use to flesh, and I do have these tools and they come in handy for other animals. For example, this fleshing knife. This is great for sheep and other large animals, but this is way overkill for a rabbit. You definitely don't need anything like that for rabbits. Also, these Yulu knives, again, really nice for sheep, alpacas, cattle, anything that has a large hide and you need to really scrape it. The rabbits are pretty small, and honestly, just a butter knife works for me and my fingers. So very simple, and we'll show you how I use this later, but very simple. This is the only thing that you might not have in your kitchen that you might need to go get. pH strips. Very, very important to make sure that your pickle is the right acidity. You can also use a pH pen, but those come with calibration issues and you want to make sure that it's up to date on that. Otherwise, you can lose your whole batch of rabbit hides like I did. So pH strips are a great thing to have around and necessary for this process. You're also going to want a couple of milk crates. I've developed a good system where you can have the hides in one crate and set on another crate, and you can do your rinsing in here while it drains out, as well as kind of a larger bucket helps. You can set the crate in here and again, use the bucket to catch any of the chemicals that you might want to save, or it sits in there really nicely. So you don't have to have these items. You could also just use a regular bucket and a table, but I've learned that this comes in handy for me. And a stirring stick. So when your hide is in the pickle and the other solutions, you want to be able to stir it. This is just a piece of bamboo off of our farm. And those are all the materials that you need. And now we've got our rabbit hides, which are ready for step 1. These rabbit hides were butchered and skinned, probably 5 weeks ago. I wasn't quite ready to do them in the whole batch that I did. And so what I did to save them until I was ready to tan them was I folded them skin to skin and I stuck them in the freezer. Hides can be kept in the freezer for pretty much indefinitely, as long as you fold them skin to skin. They are good to go. You just take them out of the freezer when you're ready to tan them to start the process, and they thaw in about half a day or so. And when they're thawed, they are ready to go. I've learned that batches of about 20 hides is a good batch for me to manage. I've done as many as 35, and I've done as little as one. One isn't really totally worth my time, but it's great if you're just starting out to just really focus on that one hide. Once you get the hang of it, you can kind of stockpile your hides and do more at a time. So I've got 4 hides here. I'm hoping each one will kind of present different challenges that we can talk about as we go through the process. These are just a little stuck together, but that's okay. That's not a big deal at all. Okay, if you can see, there's quite a lot of kind of fleshy material on the hide still. You'll see this fat pocket here, some blood vessels, and a lot of fat around the side of the legs. This stuff is good to get off before you apply the salt. You don't need to go crazy and try to deflesh the entire hide at this point. What I found is that fleshing after salting is actually much easier because the salt dries up the flesh and it allows me to actually grab the flesh and tear it off, versus, as you can see, it's very slippery to grab and to tear. And so I like to wait until after my hide is salted before fleshing. Though this kind of goopy fat stuff is really easy to just dig your fingernail in there and just kind of tear it off. Again, you don't have to be too concerned about getting every last piece off at this stage. There are going to be many opportunities later on to get all of the flesh gone. And so I'm going to work on this hide here, taking off all of those goopies. The blood vessels are fine to leave on. Eventually you want to flesh down to the layer past the blood vessels, so you don't want any blood vessels on your membrane. I'm struggling here. So this is what happens, is it's very slippery and the membrane's really on there. So at this point, you know, getting in there and taking that flesh off is darn near impossible. And so it's hard. It's hard and it's really not worth the effort at this point. So I don't worry about it. I just get what's easy. Okay. So as you can see, this hide is by no means perfect. It has lots of flesh still on it, but it is ready for salting. The slippery flesh is just not worth getting off at this point, but I did manage to get all of these big fat globules off. So I'll start on my next hide. The fat comes off really easy, and there's 2 pockets of it, usually in kind of the hindquarters of the rabbit, as well as along the front legs of the rabbit. And as you can see, these are 12-week-old rabbits, and I'm using quite a lot of force here, and I'm not worried about it tearing. This is a great example, actually. You can see the layer that we want to get down to, and this is the layer of all the membranes that is still attached, and eventually we will be able to peel that layer and get it all the way off, but like I said, at this stage, it's incredibly hard to get off. So I don't like to flesh at this stage. This smells like a skunk. We have our 4 rabbit hides ready for salting. Again, the membranes are not totally off. I did manage to get a pretty good globule of fat here off each one. So that was the goal and mission accomplished. And as a bonus, I've got this skunk that I skinned a while back and thought I would try to tan it here on camera with y'all. My first time working with a skunk, and during skinning it, I kind of ripped it already. So we're gonna learn this one together. So we'll get some salt on that guy too. I am just washing my hands because now I'm gonna be putting on my rubber gloves. You don't have to wear your rubber gloves for the salting process, but my hands are kind of salt sensitive, and rubbing the salt in the hide can kind of tear up my hands. So I like to wear my gloves. Now, when you're getting salt, you might as well just go to your feed store and buy a 50-pound bag for about $8. It's kind of funny, when I first started tanning, I had an alpaca hide to do, and so I went to Walmart and I bought as many tiny little, They were the biggest containers I could find at Walmart, but they were like little containers, and I had a whole cart full of them. And the lady was like, "What are you doing?" And had to explain to her that I was tanning a hide. And this is a much better and cheaper option. Just go to your feed store. A lot of folks say you have to use non-iodized salt, but I've heard other folks say that that doesn't matter at all. I use non-iodized salt. Really, I don't think it matters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the hide out flat. The salt is already contaminated with my rubber gloves from my previous hide, so I'm not worried about that. I'm going to apply a really even layer all over the rabbit hide. You don't have to get too overboard, but what you do want to do is rub the salt all the way to the edges. Make sure the whole thing is coated. The point of the salt is to draw fluid out of the tissue while also creating an environment that is not sustainable for bacteria. Because if bacteria get into the hide and the hair follicles, that's when you're going to get hair slippage. So a nice, good, even layer on your rabbit hide. And this is another point where you can either leave it laying flat somewhere where animals can't get to it, or it's better if you can hang it somewhere, because the hanging is going to allow gravity to actually pull the fluid from it and drip off of it. So hang it somewhere where you're not worried about the puddle of salty flesh goop being on the ground. We hang ours in our barn, and I sweep it up usually the next day. But again, I've done it on a kind of a tilt, a milk crate, a table, and that's totally fine too. But the hanging it is better. So as you can see, the layer isn't super thick, but it's enough to cover the whole hide and pull out some extra moisture, as well as prevent bacteria from coming in. I'm going to do that now with the rest of my hides. We are just getting done with these hides now. They can be left on salt indefinitely, really, as long as they dry out completely. So that's another way you can kind of hold off on tanning your hides. Instead of the freezer, if you don't have freezer space, is getting them on a salt. Let's finish up this skunk here. And then what I'm going to be doing is hanging them in our barn overnight. I usually do 12 to 24 hours, but again, you can do it for as long as you want. Sometimes I refresh a salt layer if it's kind of looking like it's not completely covered anymore, or if a lot of moisture has been pulled out and it needs a little extra salt, I'll just come in there and put a little more salt on it. Finished just in time for the rain to start. I'm going to go get these hides hanging up in the barn. The hides are hung in the barn here, and as you can see, they're already dripping fluid. I put some straw down to kind of catch that fluid so it's not a big old puddle. We are in Oregon, and this time of year it is humid and rainy, and so the hides are not going to completely dry out in this salt. That's okay for this process. However, I would not store the hides like this long term unless they were completely dried out by the salt. But because I'm going to be back in 12 to 24 hours, it's not a big deal. The salt is already doing its job. So I will return tomorrow.